A mother discovers a 2.5-page handwritten ransom note on the staircase of her Boulder, Colorado home on December 26, 1996. The note demands exactly $118,000 for the safe return of her 6-year-old daughter. Patsy Ramsey calls 911 at 5:52 a.m. 7 hours later, her husband John finds JonBenet in the basement wine cellar. A handmade garrote is wrapped around the child's neck. That garrote contains DNA evidence that could identify the killer. 29 years later, it remains never tested. Boulder police arrive at 755 15th Street and make a devastating decision within the first hour. They do not seal the crime scene. Friends, family members, and a pastor move freely through the house. Officers do not search the basement for 7 hours. The ransom note sits on the kitchen counter as guests handle dishes nearby. Evidence degrades with every passing minute. How does the investigation that should bring justice crumble before it truly begins? JonBenet Patricia Ramsey lights up every room she enters. At 6 years old, she carries a smile that disarms strangers and a laugh her family describes as contagious. She loves playing dress-up and performing in local beauty pageants across Colorado. Her blonde hair and bright eyes earn her titles and trophies. But JonBenet is more than a pageant child. She draws pictures for her older brother Burke and begs her father to read bedtime stories every single night. Her family occupies a prominent position in Boulder social circles. John Ramsey runs Access Graphics, a computer distribution company generating over $1 billion in annual revenue. Patsy is a former Miss West Virginia who channels her energy into her children and community events. JonBenet attends High Peaks Elementary School, where teachers remember her warmth and eagerness. She tells her mother she wants to grow up to be a veterinarian. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room, a family friend later recalls. Christmas Day 1996 begins with presents and laughter inside the Ramsey home. The family attends a holiday party at the home of their friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. JonBenet falls asleep in the car on the ride home. John carries her upstairs and puts her to bed. Patsy changes JonBenet into pajamas and tucks her in. The house grows quiet. 2 stockings still hang by the fireplace. Nobody inside that home suspects these are the last peaceful hours they will ever know. What Patsy Ramsey encounters the next morning defies every expectation of a day after Christmas. She walks down the spiral staircase at approximately 5:45 a.m. and discovers 3 pages of handwritten text spread across the steps. The note begins with the words, "Mr. Ramsey," and demands $118,000 for JonBenet's return. You would expect a ransom note to be brief and direct. This one stretches across 2.5 pages with theatrical language and specific instructions. Something about it feels deeply wrong. Patsy screams and runs to check JonBenet's bedroom. The bed is empty. She grabs the phone and calls 911 at 5:52 a.m. with a voice that fractures under crushing panic. "We have a kidnapping," she tells the dispatcher.
Officers Rick French and Carl Veitch arrive within minutes. They examine the ransom note but make a critical decision. They treat the home as a kidnapping scene rather than a potential crime scene. Friends and family begin arriving. The contamination starts immediately. Boulder police contact the FBI and request assistance. The note instructs the Ramseys to prepare $118,000 and wait for a phone call between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. The call never comes. Hours pass with no contact from any alleged kidnapper. Detective Linda Arndt stands essentially alone in the house with multiple civilians by midday. At approximately 1:05 p.m., she suggests John Ramsey search the home. He goes directly to the basement. He opens the wine cellar door. JonBenet lies motionless on the floor with a white blanket partially covering her body. How does a father walk directly to the one room in a sprawling basement where his daughter's body lies hidden? John Ramsey picks up JonBenet and carries her upstairs. He places her near the Christmas tree. Detective Arndt later describes the moment in chilling terms. "I looked at John Ramsey, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up," she tells ABC News. This action contaminates the body and the crime scene beyond repair. This single moment fractures the investigation permanently. One devastating forensic detail makes this case unlike any other in American criminal history. The medical examiner determines JonBenet dies from asphyxiation combined with a skull fracture. A handmade garrote, fashioned from a broken paintbrush handle and white cord, is the murder weapon. The garrote shows signs of deliberate construction. Trace DNA from an unknown male is found on JonBenet's clothing. Yet the garrote itself has never been submitted for comprehensive DNA testing. The instrument that kills this child remains unexamined. The central piece of evidence sits untouched for 29 years. Boulder Police Department launches an investigation that immediately collides with federal authority. According to Lawrence Schiller's account in Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, the Boulder Police and FBI clash over jurisdiction and strategy from the first day. Boulder detectives have never handled a case of this magnitude. The city averages fewer than 2 homicides per year. Detective Steve Thomas later writes that critical evidence collection protocols are ignored during the first 72 hours. The investigation stumbles before it finds its footing. Notice how the ransom note itself becomes the most analyzed document in modern criminal history. Forensic linguists examine every word across its 2.5 pages. The note quotes lines from movies. References to Speed and Dirty Harry appear throughout. It signs off as SBTC. The handwriting analysis proves inconclusive. According to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Patsy Ramsey cannot be eliminated as the author. 4 of 6 experts consulted identify similarities between the note and her handwriting samples. John Ramsey is definitively excluded. The $118,000 figure emerges as one of the haunting details in the entire investigation.
This amount matches almost exactly the net value of a bonus John Ramsey receives from Access Graphics earlier that year. The information appears on a pay stub. According to investigators, very few people outside the Ramsey family would have access to this specific figure. Pay attention to this number because it narrows the field of suspects dramatically. Either the killer has intimate knowledge of the family's finances, or the note originates from inside the household. Forensic teams recover trace DNA from the waistband of JonBenet's long underwear and from beneath her fingernails. The DNA profile belongs to an unidentified male. In 2003, the profile enters the combined DNA index system. It matches nobody. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office uses touch DNA analysis to confirm the same unknown male profile on a second article of clothing. This profile is from an unknown male and does not belong to any member of the Ramsey family, announces District Attorney Mary Lacey. The DNA exonerates the Ramseys in her estimation. Not everyone agrees. The timeline of that night collapses under scrutiny from multiple angles. The Ramseys state they return home between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. on Christmas night. A neighbor reports seeing lights on in the kitchen at approximately 12 a.m. Another neighbor's motion sensor alarm activates at some point during the night. Burke Ramsey initially tells investigators he goes straight to bed. He later acknowledges staying awake and playing with a toy. "I was just playing down there," he tells a child psychologist in a recorded interview. Why do the details keep shifting? Forensic pathologist Dr. Werner Spitz examines the autopsy findings and constructs a sequence of events that challenges official theories. The skull fracture measures 8.5 inches long. It occurs either before or simultaneously with the strangulation. The time between the head injury and death remains disputed among experts. Some forensic specialists argue the injury suggests 2 separate attacks. Others maintain a single continuous assault. According to the autopsy report filed by Dr. John Meyer, JonBenet also suffers vaginal trauma. The full forensic picture reveals a crime of devastating complexity, and no clear answer. Every theory about this case leads investigators toward the same unanswered questions. The evidence fractures into contradictions that 29 years of analysis cannot resolve. One name dominates the investigation from the first hours. John and Patsy Ramsey remain under what Boulder police call an umbrella of suspicion for years. Prosecutors point to the ransom note as evidence of staging. They argue no outside intruder would spend the time to write a 2.5-page letter inside the home. The Ramseys hire attorneys and a public relations team within days. According to Detective Steve Thomas, the parents refused to submit to formal police interviews for 4 months. Their behavior strikes investigators as inconsistent with grieving parents desperate to find their daughter's killer.
But the DNA evidence delivers a shattering counterpoint. The unknown male profile found on JonBenet's clothing does not match John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. It does not match any family friend or associate tested during the investigation. If the Ramseys staged the crime scene, the presence of an unidentified male's DNA becomes nearly impossible to explain. Defense attorneys argue this evidence alone eliminates the family. Follow the DNA, John Ramsey repeatedly tells the media. The physical evidence says one thing, the behavioral evidence says another. According to former FBI profiler John Douglas, who consults with the Ramsey family, the crime scene displays characteristics inconsistent with parental homicide. Douglas argues the garrote demonstrates a level of violence typically associated with sexual predators rather than accidental parental cover-ups. Others disagree. Former Boulder detective Steve Thomas presents a theory in his 2000 book suggesting Patsy kills JonBenet accidentally during a bedwetting incident and stages the scene. Thomas offers no physical evidence for this theory. He relies entirely on behavioral analysis and the ransom note similarities. 9-year-old Burke Ramsey faces scrutiny that follows him into adulthood. A CBS documentary in 2016 suggests Burke strikes JonBenet with a heavy flashlight found on the kitchen counter. Burke sues CBS for $750 million. The case settles out of court. No physical evidence connects Burke to the crime. Forensic experts remain divided on whether a 9-year-old possesses the strength to inflict the skull fracture described in the autopsy. Could a child really do this? Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender living near the Ramsey home, surfaces as a person of interest years after the murder. When arrested on unrelated charges, investigators find a photograph of JonBenet in his backpack. According to court records, Oliva writes letters from prison appearing to confess involvement. "I hurt that girl," he allegedly writes to a former classmate. Oliva is never formally charged in connection with JonBenet's death. His DNA reportedly does not match the unknown male profile found at the crime scene. Imagine you are a grand juror reviewing 13 months of testimony and evidence in this case. In October 1999, the Boulder County grand jury votes to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death. They also vote for an accessory charge, alleging the parents helped an unknown person commit the murder. District Attorney Alex Hunter refuses to sign the indictment. He states publicly that the evidence is insufficient for prosecution. "I do not have enough to file," Hunter tells the press. The grand jury's decision remains sealed and secret for 14 years, until a court order shatters the silence. On one hand, the behavioral evidence points toward the family. The ransom note, the staging, the delayed cooperation all suggest involvement. On the other hand, the DNA evidence points toward an intruder. An unidentified male profile appears on multiple items. The grand jury believes both realities coexist. Their indictment suggests the parents either commit the crime or know who does and help conceal it.
Yet the district attorney overrides 12 citizens who review all the evidence. Then in 2013, a court order forces the release of the sealed indictment. Then everything shifts. After years of stalled investigation, genetic genealogy emerges as the technology that could finally solve this murder. In 2022, Boulder police announced they submit the unknown male DNA profile for advanced genetic genealogy testing. This technique traces DNA through public databases to identify unknown individuals. It solves the Golden State Killer case and dozens of unsolved cases across the country. Investigators in the Ramsey family express cautious optimism. What arrives months later changes nothing. No match. The genetic genealogy search fails to identify the unknown male whose DNA appears on JonBenet's clothing. The technique that cracks unsolved cases nationwide produces no actionable lead in this one. Yet a far more fundamental scandal persists beneath this disappointment. The garrote has never undergone comprehensive DNA analysis using modern forensic technology. The cord, twisted around a 6-year-old girl's neck, sits untouched. Test the weapon, John Ramsey pleads publicly. Boulder police offer no explanation for why they have not. Consider what modern forensic science can accomplish in 2026. Touch DNA analysis can extract viable profiles from surfaces handled decades ago. Advanced genetic genealogy can identify individuals from partial DNA fragments. Forensic laboratories routinely solve cases from the 1960s and 1970s using evidence previously considered too degraded for testing. The technology exists. The evidence sits in storage. The murder weapon that could name a killer remains untouched by the most powerful identification tools ever developed. This failure defies every principle of criminal investigation. Patsy Ramsey dies of ovarian cancer on June 24, 2006, in Roswell, Georgia. She is 49 years old. She never sees resolution in her daughter's case. She spends her final decade under relentless public suspicion for a crime that is never proven against her. She went to her grave not knowing who killed her daughter, John Ramsey later states. Patsy is buried next to JonBenet at St. James Episcopal Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia. Mother and daughter rest side by side. Neither will ever know the truth. The Ramsey case transforms into a national obsession that exposes the destructive power of media speculation. Television networks broadcast daily coverage for months. Tabloids publish unverified theories as headlines. The family faces accusation without indictment and judgment without trial. According to media analysts, the case generates more sustained coverage than any criminal investigation since the O.J. Simpson trial. JonBenet's pageant photographs circulate endlessly. Who remembers the girl behind the photographs? John Ramsey continues to advocate for advanced testing of the physical evidence throughout the 2020s. He remarries in 2011 and relocates. Burke Ramsey pursues a career in technology and largely avoids public life.
In multiple interviews, John Ramsey expresses frustration with the Boulder Police Department's handling of evidence. Every day that goes by without testing that weapon is a day justice is denied, he tells investigators and media. The family's pain compounds with every passing year of institutional inaction. The case fundamentally changes how law enforcement approaches high-profile child homicide investigations. Police departments across the country revise crime scene protocols to prevent the contamination failures that plague the Ramsey investigation. The FBI develops enhanced guidelines for ransom cases involving potential crime scenes. Colorado passes legislation strengthening victim advocacy resources. The case also sparks national debate about the child beauty pageant industry and the exploitation of young performers. Boulder's police department undergoes leadership changes across multiple decades. The case passes through the hands of at least 5 lead investigators. In 2023, a new Unsolved case team reviews all physical evidence with fresh eyes. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation provides updated forensic support. Governor Jared Polis publicly calls for the case to be transferred to a special task force with full authority and resources. As of early 2026, the garrote still sits in evidence storage. The most important piece of physical evidence in one of America's most infamous unsolved murders awaits the test that could end 29 years of questions.
John Ramsey stands before cameras in 2024 and makes a direct appeal. He asks Boulder police to release the evidence for independent testing. He offers to fund the process personally. His voice carries the weight of a father who buries his daughter at age 6 and spends 30 decades fighting for answers. Former FBI agent and forensic expert James Fitzgerald supports the call for testing. There is no legitimate investigative reason not to test that garrote, Fitzgerald states. The weapon sits in a controlled facility. The science exists to extract answers from it. Nearly 29 years have passed since a 6-year-old girl with a bright smile and dreams of helping animals is found dead in her own basement. JonBenet Ramsey would be 35 years old today. Her murder weapon sits in evidence storage. A garrote fashioned from a broken paintbrush and white cord remains untested by forensic technology that solves cases far older. A family still waits for the answers that 29 years of investigation have failed to deliver. Justice does not expire, but it demands action. The garrote holds its secrets in silence.